Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, RJ Carbone. You are listening to BD4, where there's no better way to get your Yankees and Knicks analysis. We also do MMA. Yanks every series, Knicks every game, MMA on occasion. Let's get to it.
Anthony for three. That one goes down, and the game is tied.
I'd like to take this chance to apologize to absolutely nobody.
The Yankees are champions of baseball.
Shaking and baking right here on the neophyte.
U.S. trying to close the show. She was doing a great job of feeding that. It's over.
Don't you regret not coming to the Knicks? Don't you regret not coming to the Knicks?
Game over. World Series over. Yankees win. The Yankees win.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the podcast, episode 710 of BD4. We are talking New York Knicks. It's been a while since we discussed Knicks on the show. The last Knicks episode we did was after the loss in the postseason against the Pacers. So that was the last episode we did. We took a long break. We usually don't record in the offseason just because we're focused on the other sports that we cover, so we try to get to them when we can, and that's what we're going to do in this show. It's been a while, so welcome back, Knicks fans. We are getting into some New York Knicks. I don't know how long this episode's going to be. I don't know how good it's going to be, to be honest with you. I don't have a ton of notes. I just have a bunch of scattered words on a Microsoft Word page. Usually it's very well organized, but I don't know where to start. There's so much to discuss that I'm most likely not going to get to everything. I'm most likely not going to get into the specifics and details of it all, but I'll try to hit on the very important things. I'll try to hit on the things that I find important, the things that I want to discuss and I want to talk to you about. So hope you guys do enjoy this podcast episode. Episode 710, a little bit of a Knicks 2024 offseason update as we go into the 24-25 season. I think the preseason begins in 22 days. October 6th, I believe, they open up the Knicks they open up their preseason. But it's been a ride. It was a ride over the summer, right? A lot happened. Let's see. This is all scattered. I'm probably gonna miss some things. It's not gonna be in order, but the Knicks did a lot. They obviously made the trade for Mikal Bridges. They do that deal with the Nets. He comes to the Knicks. Precious Achiuwa re-signed because Isaiah Hartenstein left for OKC. Tom Thibodeau has been extended. Jalen Brunson has been extended, and in addition to that, named the captain. I think he's the best athlete in New York City. I think he's the face of New York sports because he's amazing, and he does the job in the postseason time and time again. The Knicks signed Campaign, which is going to be interesting to see how that impacts Deuce McBride's playing time. Hopefully it doesn't. Maybe we can get into that later. I don't know because there's a lot I want to discuss that I have on my notes. That's not one of them. Maybe we'll get into that. We'll have, maybe if I can get to a couple of episodes, we'll break some stuff down that we don't in this one, but we're going to try. Obviously it's a big Yankees podcast right now because we're in the midst of the pennant race, a big pennant race, but that's basically all the stuff that went down in the summer. And as we creep closer to the season, I figured I'd hop on here. Obviously the Mikal Bridges deal being the big one, right? The Knicks traded everybody expected when they made the move with Detroit that they expected to flip Bojan Bogdanovic in the summer. That's what I was warning everybody. That contract's only here to play salary filler, right? Evan Fournier out, the Bojan contract tradable in, and the Knicks used that Bojan contract as well as, I believe, a protected pick, some second-round picks, and then every single unprotected first-round pick they own and can trade. They used all of that and traded that to Brooklyn for Mikal Bridges. So, is it an overpay for a guy who might not make an all-star team ever here because he's playing with 2 stars? And sure, it's an overpay. It's a little bit of an overpay, but you know what? It was must needed, right? And the way I talk about it is like, you're not paying for Mikal Bridges. What you're paying for is the final piece to a championship puzzle. At least that's the hope here, right? You are paying for a guy who's going to come in here and perfectly fit the culture. He comes in here, you're keeping the captain happy, right? The whole, Nova Knicks thing has been completed. This is what many people believe to be the last infinity stone on this team. Leon is adding to a core without changing the DNA of this roster, right? He's keeping everyone content. There's no major shifts in roles, but there could be a major upgrade on the team in this rotation now. You're bringing in a guy who fits Tibbs' system to a T. This is a guy who's durable, Tom Thibodeau. This is a guy who plays defense, Tom Thibodeau. And this is a guy who can play off the ball, Tom Thibodeau. Okay? You're making the Knicks more attractive, right? And, yes, they got rid of a lot, and this might be their last big move. But you are making it attractive for other guys around the league in case you do have to maneuver and make another move at some point, whether that be in free agency, if they get their cap situation figured out, or in a trade, because there's a lot still to talk about. But it also means that, like, I was thinking about it when it went down. Talk means shit. Like, all the talk about, like, feuds means nothing. Like, you think about some of the trades now the Knicks have made, and you go back to that Toronto Raptors drama. It all started last year with the lawsuit, and, people were saying the same exact thing that they were with Mikal Bridges. Including myself, they were saying the Raptors will never do a deal with the Knicks. They're never going to get Anunoby because of the whole lawsuit, right? The two teams, Masai Ujiri and the Knicks, are not in good graces. So that would never happen. And then it happens. People were saying the same thing. It's the Knicks and it's the Nets. These are two teams who share the same city, although they're the Jersey Nets. They have not done a trade with each other, I think, since the late 80s. It was never going to happen. Never. Nobody expected this. It happened. So I think this just goes to show, it proves that talk is shit. All the drama, the fake crap that's created on social media about feuds and these teams aren't going to do deals because they have this beef. It's all fucking garbage. It's all garbage. At the end of the day, it's a business. Money talks. And this is how that works. Winning talks. It's a business. That's how it's done. It's not done with emotion. It's done with decisions that are solely based on how can I improve my organization. So the Knicks have Mikal Bridges, and I'm excited. I'm very excited. I still think there are questions. I think the big question here is it enough to beat Boston? Or is it enough to win a title, right? Everyone's talking about Boston. Is it enough to win a title? And most likely the East is going to run through Boston, right? You have to beat Boston to get there. But I don't know. That remains to be seen. Like, it's a solid critique for sure, right? Do the Knicks have enough superstar talent there? It's an understandable critique. I get it. You do have Brunson. And now you're bringing back Julius Randle to play with Brunson for a season. You know? And it's such a great fit. Like, it's not just a good fit. It's such a perfect fit adding Bridges to this rotation. Like, and you look at the modern NBA, the landscape in today's game, it's all about wing depth. Everybody's a wing. Use so many wings, so many talented wings in today's game. And every team that wants to win a championship has to, in my opinion, have depth at the wing. Look at Boston. That's a perfect example. They won the championship behind their wing depth. The Knicks lost the second round of the playoffs last year because of that. Because they didn't have the personnel, so they were tore apart. Their pick and roll defense was horrendous because they were so uncomfortable on switches. They weren't often doing it because they just didn't have the personnel. They didn't have enough healthy bodies. So adding Mikal Bridges on the wings next to OG Anunoby, it's going to give Tom Thibodeau a lot of creativity. The lineups that he's going to be able to put out there, so many different combinations that we can be able to use, you know, and I'm not going to get into all that specific stuff again in this episode, but, you know, like you can go a straight up defense 5 lineup where Deuce McBride's your point. And then you're going all defenders after that. You know, you can do so many things. I think the idea here with Bridges is that he's going to be in the starting lineup, which would probably mean that the big Ragu is going to go to the bench, right? He'll be with the second unit. But that changes, like the wing position is going to be so much better. You know, you needed size and you needed defense at the wing. But there were so many times last year where the Knicks were just a little short on that. So that's why Tibbs refused to play Dante, Grimes, and Brunson all together. Remember, that would never happen. You would never see those guys at wing because Tibbs just didn't trust that lack of size. But now you can go deep at wing. And your starting lineup's going to be Brunson, most likely Brunson, Mikal, OG, Randle, Mitch. So you're able to stagger Dante DiVincenzo with so much more now. You've got wing switchability. You can go playmaking lineups, shooting lineups, again, all defense lineups, small ball lineups, which we'll get to. When the Knicks lost Quentin Grimes, they didn't have a guy last year to guard the point of attack versus Smalls, right? Now, OG Anunoby is capable, but he struggles navigating screens sometimes. And he struggles defending quicker guards like Tyrese Maxey. It gives him problems. But with Mikal Bridges here, OG can now slide back into his help role. So he's going to be in help on the back line. His role will be more as that low man defender, as a guy who could just play that free safety role. Right? And you can put Mikal, who's one of the best point of attack wing defenders in the NBA, at the point of attack. That was his job when he played with Phoenix. Guard the point of attack. Guard those quicker guards. He's able to get skinny around screens. He's able to defend in isolation. But he can also defend off ball. You know, he's a very disciplined defender. He's not fouling a lot. It's going to help a lot. You know, Dante's not going to be on the point of attack all the time, which means the Knicks don't have to help strong side if it's Mikal or OG on the ball. A lot of the time last year, the Knicks were beat on back cuts because they had to abandon the short corner to help up front. You know, but they're not going to, it's not going to require them to bring as much help because they're just going to have depth at wing. That's one of the things I'm very excited for. You know, so as much as I loved Donovan Mitchell, and if the Knicks did go for the firepower move and they tried to get Mitchell and they got him, like, I've acknowledged before, like, that would have, yeah, on paper, cool, fun, and I actually think it would have worked offensively. I don't know how that would have worked defensively. I think you would have had to maneuver so many different lineups and stagger and be incredibly flexible. And do we trust Tibbs to do all that? I know he was better last year, but like it's asking a lot. And would Tibbs even trust like Donovan Mitchell to play with Brunson? If the Knicks' problem last postseason, was being put in a blender on pick and rolls, then it would have never worked with Donovan Mitchell and Brunson together. Right? They didn't have the personnel last year to where they could hide Brunson effectively. Now you're talking about having to hide two guys who can't switch on or off or can't peel. I mean, that sounds impossible. It sounds ridiculous. That would never work. It would never have worked. But instead, now you're building around Brunson and you're giving him the right pieces to work with. And I think that's going to be really effective for the Knicks defensively. We're going to head to break. We'll be right back in about 1 minute.
Hey there, thanks for listening in so far. If you enjoy this episode, please give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. And if you're on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks so much. You can follow us on social media as well. On Instagram, we're at BD4Pod and at Rob J. Carbone. On X, we're at BD4Pod and at RJCBD4. And on Facebook, we're BD4. If you're interested in our website, just go to www.bd4blog.com. You can subscribe to our blog on there right on the front page. Just like on the podcast, we cover Yankees, Knicks, and MMA. Also on our website are the links to the different platforms for the podcast. Thanks so much.
Okay, welcome back to the show. Welcome back to BD4, episode 710 of the podcast. I appreciate you all tuning in, doing a little Knicks 2024 off-season update. Little off-season update, kind of preseason. But yeah, we just briefly talked on the wing depth that we now have with Mikal Bridges here. Julius Randle will be returning this year. Seems like he's going to be coming into camp healthy and he'll be able to make opening tip. Some storylines is how is he going to return from surgery? How is he going to look physically, of course? How is he going to be mentally? Does it affect the way he plays? He's a bruiser. He'll attack a closeout. He'll take care of a mismatch on the low post. How does it affect his rebounding, the defense, side-to-side movement? Like it's going to be interesting. Cardio, So that's a storyline to follow. Hopefully he's fully healthy and he looks just as good as he always has. We'll talk more about that on a different episode, as well as obviously the extension talks. Will he be extended? Will he be traded, right? Moved for picks to create cap room? Are they just going to ride out this year with him and then figure out their decision after? It's, that's another conversation that we can have in a different episode. But regardless, Randle is making a return and he is so important to this team. They did all that last year without him for a good chunk of time, right? After January, they did all that without him. They got as far as they got without Randle, without OG Anunoby. It's really impressive without Mitchell Robinson for a great chunk of time. It was really impressive to see them do that with such little bodies. But Randle is a horse, and he's going to take pressure off of Jalen. The gravity alone that he has is going to help. If a defender leaves Randle for Brunson, Randle's got the spot up opportunity, or if that defender has to hard closeout now, Randle attacks the closeout. But it's important. I'm going to be looking forward to seeing how his shooting looks. Because if he can shoot well from three and he's just respected on the 3-point line, then he's able to attack those closeouts, right? But if he's not respected from the 3-point line this year, I don't think defenses are going to close out on him, and they're just going to ignore him when he's on the perimeter, and they're just going to help on the Jalen. So that's going to be something I'm looking at. How does Julius's shot look? Because his jumper was inconsistent last year. You know, most of his points came just getting buckets underneath the paint. But yeah, it's you know, Randle's going to be having to take on a larger role now with with Isaiah Hartenstein gone, right? I'm curious to see how that works. iHeart's gone, and I don't know if it's hit me yet, but he's gone. The Knicks couldn't go past the 472 figure, and so iHeart chased the money, and now he's out west. And so now your center position begins with Mitchell Robinson, who's, let's just be honest, he's not the most reliable big to have starting for you, just because of his inconsistencies and obviously because of his health problems. He's going to go down at some point. He's Giancarlo Stanton. That's who he is. When Mitchell Robinson is right, he brings all of the defense and the intangibles that iHeart can. The offensive rebounding, the screening, the pick and roll defense. He's even better than iHeart in drop coverage, the paint defense, the hustle, right? He's so good at battling for position. He brings all of that when he's right, and he brings all of that at the same time. And it creates this really dynamic defensive big, this really dynamic rim runner. So he has a chance, if he's right, to make this defense dynamic and the number one defense in the NBA by far, if he's healthy. Because you throw lineups out there with OG, Mikal, and Mitch, wingspan right there. If you throw lineups out there with that wingspan, that kind of wingspan, you're going to be able to do a whole lot of shutting down. You're going to be able to clog lanes. You're going to be able to seal off gaps. You're going to be able to switch 1 to 5. But what scares Knicks fans is just the health and consistency. He's got to be right? There are other things, like it's the lack of offense. There's no shooting with Mitchell Robinson. There's no spacing on the floor when he's down there, especially when Tibbs is playing Precious at power forward. So there's an extra man to guard elsewhere off the weak side, and they just rotate. But my hope is that we see some more small ball lineups. With no Isaiah Hartenstein here, Tibbs can't be reluctant. And at times last year, he still was reluctant to go small. He cannot be reluctant. I would love for him to use his flexibility. He's got so many options now. It would allow the Knicks to play 5 out, to play a space and shoot offense. Surround Randle with spacers. Now, the concern when you're putting Randle at the small ball 5 spot, obviously, playing as a roll man, he's not great there. Screening can be an issue. And his rim protection, right? It's the rim protection that Tom Thibodeau really is worrisome of. I say to that, when you're playing Randle at small ball 5, he's not technically playing 5 because you're going to have Anunoby out there. And Anunoby would be your true 5 because he's going to be guarding those bigs. Right? That still changes other things. You have to put Randle somewhere else. But, Precious Achiuwa is going to be getting some time at backup big. And I think playing him at 5 is important because I think we all dislike those Precious Mitch 4 or 5 lineups. The defense is more than tolerable. It's really good defense. They get stops, but the spacing is just so poor. And it gives you just these long dry spells of no offensive production in the half court. So I think playing Precious at the 5 is going to be important as well when Mitch sits. Now there's concern there about going small. If it's like some of those West Coast teams, Minnesota, OKC, Denver, the Lakers, right? Those bigger front courts can give you issues, right? When OG's at the 5 or Precious is at the 5, because none of them are true 5s. Precious isn't even a true 4, which is why it makes him tricky to play. But the Knicks should be okay against Eastern Conference teams. Like if we're talking, how are they going to fare in the postseason with small ball lineups? I think, like besides Milwaukee, right? Because Milwaukee has Brook and Giannis at the 4 and 5. Besides that, and I know OG does, he's done a commendable job on Giannis. But like when Giannis is going downhill, OG just doesn't have that size and the bulkiness to stop him. Not many teams have that. But I will say, if you go small with OG at the 5, you're going to be able to handle the pick and pop better. Right? Those lineups where you have multiple wings out there, the screen navigating, recovering, which is why the Knicks can match up with Boston a lot better now. Because the Knicks can match Boston in wing depth. Again, the big issue last year obviously was defending the Kristaps pick and pop with his wings and guards, right? But the Knicks now have an extra guy to switch with. I would expect the Knicks to approach those pick and pops a lot differently now. We saw towards the end of last year, they were veer switching, especially if Mitch is in a drop. Or you can peel switch it, right? You peel switch off the nail. If you have wingspan in the action, you can afford to do that. So it's going to be, they can match up with a lot of teams. Philly, Philly's not abnormally large up front. That's another Eastern Conference team who they can really match up with. They can switch for Maxey. They can switch for the Paul George matchup now. They can. We saw them switch with Precious and OG Anunoby. Now you add Mikal Bridges to that. So I think against smaller front courts, Precious and Randle are best at the 5. I would love to see those small ball lineups, especially Precious because he's switchable 1 to 5. He can guard point. He can guard big. He can guard wing. He's very versatile. So that's the defensive part. Obviously those small ball 5 lineups will give you playmaking and shooting. I'm curious to see how Randle's used as a playmaker this year. That's something I was thinking about earlier. Julius is like with Isaiah Hartenstein gone. Will Julius be used more in that role? Because Isaiah Hartenstein was a big piece to the Knicks offense in the second half of the season. When Julius went down, the Knicks ran a lot of offense through iHart. It was that high short pick and roll, right? You bring up the blitz, Brunson finds iHart on the short roll. It's iHart stationary where he's used as a hub and he's hitting cutters. He's hitting guys, in blind pig or different triangle actions. Is Julius going to be experimented with in that role? Because we really haven't seen Julius used as a hub passer much. Most of Julius's passes and his assists come as a gravity passer. Draw 2, kick. Draw 2, kick. That's how he passes. Or it's in DHO with Dante or Brunson or any of his guards. So the offense might look a little different this year. You're losing a big piece in Ihart. It's not just the defense he brought, but it was the offense. It was the playmaking. But it's going to be interesting because, a lot of Dante DiVincenzo's assists went to those Ihart floaters in the middle of the key. A lot of OG Anunoby, Deuce McBride, and Brunson buckets were coming off of cuts where Ihart found them. Mikal Bridges, another guy who plays very well off ball. He's always cutting. He would have benefited from a passer like Hartenstein. So it's going to be a different look. I still think it's going to feature the same things. It's going to feature a lot of Jalen Brunson, just less mileage, less workload, right? I still think it's going to be Brunson-centric, right? Like, even with all this depth, because he's still one of the best bucket getters in the NBA. Okay? It's like the Yankees. They got Soto and Judge, right? They're relying on them because they're so historic, right? They have depth, but they're, of course, going to rely on Soto and Judge because they're so much better than the depth they have. Same thing with Brunson. He's going to be relying on because he's so much better than a lot of the Knicks they have. He's just that good. Brunson's one of the best players, if not the best player in the NBA at attacking drop. When you put a defense into a drop and your big is playing in a drop, he's in the paint and he's not switching up front, Brunson kills that. We saw that time and time again. He was dropping 30 a night last year because of drop coverage. All of the top contenders in the Eastern Conference, Philly, Milwaukee, Boston, they run drop on pick and roll versus going to a switch. And Brunson just completely takes advantage of that open space. He can exploit it because of his off-the-dribble skills, because he'll go to that floater. He'll go to the mid-range jumper. He'll step back on a recovering defender. So, yes, the defense might start, pre-switching, but, use that man to DHO or isolate the empty side for a pick and roll. The Knicks have options, but they're going to use Brunson primarily still. That's not going to change. That is not going to change. But what Mikal can also do, just like OG, is 3-and-D. He can space out the floor. You can use him to space out in the corners. That's going to give Brunson room. You can't just help on the Brunson actions. A lot, one of our bigger problems last year, I had at least, was when Tibbs played Hart with certain guys, and they just cheated off of Hart's man, or cheated off of Hart to guard Brunson actions. Well, now Hart's going to be a lot more playable because you have an extra shooter in Mikal. You can position these guys and align the floor differently the way you want it to, where you can maximize shooting, maximize spacing, and do all these types of things for Jalen. So that should be the priority, making life easier for Brunson. So he's not having to constantly create his own shot in the low paint and bang around with bigs and having to plant his foot and do all this type of crazy footwork just to get a bucket. So I'm excited for it. That's pretty much all I have. Just some quick notes. That's all that was. Just wanted to get my thoughts off. Before we do wrap this up, the NBA schedule was released, and I want to talk about the Knicks schedule that they got. It's an interesting schedule. So we'll finish up with that when we return from our final break here on BD4, episode 710. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Studio 69 Productions is a podcast production agency created by Leo Rodriguez to allow content creators to market their podcast. It's an online platform that will market your podcast or any other project that you're working on. Get in touch with Leo Rodriguez from Studio 69 Productions. You can find Studio 69 Productions on Instagram at Studio69NJ. Studio 69 Productions, where dreams are heard and born.
Thanks for listening to BD4, where there is no better way to get your Yankees and Knicks analysis. We also do MMA, Yanks every series, Knicks every game, and MMA on occasion.
Okay, welcome back to the show, episode 710 of the podcast, Knicks 2024 offseason update. Let's take a look at this schedule. So the NBA schedule came out a month ago, 2 months ago? Yeah, it was a while ago. I don't fucking remember at this point. But their first 10 games, they open up in Boston on the 22nd. Then they go home to play Indiana on the 25th. They have a home game against the Cavs on the 28th. And then they begin their first road trip. It's a 4-game road trip where they go to Miami, October 30th. They're in Detroit, November 1st. In Houston, November 4th. And in Atlanta on November 6th. Then they come back home to play Milwaukee on November 8th. And then they're back on the road again. They're back on the road again to play in Indiana on the 10th and then in Philly on the 12th. And that Philly game is the first group stage game of the NBA Cup, if you give a damn. I don't give a damn. So those are their first 10 games. 7 on the road. 7 of those 9 teams are playoff teams from last year or play-in teams from last year. So it's not an easy start. If the Knicks go 6-4, I'll consider it a win. Hopefully that's attainable. The good thing is after those 10 games, the schedule softens up a bit mid-November, including your first game against the Nets, which is also the second group stage game. You have 2 against them in the middle of November. Your first West Coast trip begins towards the end of November to wrap up the month. You're going to Phoenix, Utah, Denver, Dallas, and then that fifth game is a day game in Charlotte. Then you have that break from December 10th to the 18th. There's a break in the schedule because of the NBA Cup bullshit. So, again, if you care. Christmas Day, Wemby and the Spurs come to MSG. That'll be fun. That was a blast last time those two sides met. New Year's Day, that's a game where the Knicks will play the Utah Jazz at the Garden. January 10th, iHeart returns to the Garden. I'm expecting cheers. Hot take here. If I heard boos, I wouldn't be mad. Very hot take. Second half of the season, the real half, not the post-All-Star break half, but the actual second 50% of the season, you start in Philly on January 15th. Then you come to the Garden for 2 against Minnesota and Atlanta. And then you're in Brooklyn, basically a home game. That's the second of a back-to-back after Atlanta. And then you have a long homestand after that from the 25th to February 3rd, where you're home against the Kings, Grizzlies, Nuggets, Lakers, Rockets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right there, all at home. Your first games back from All-Star break are a back-to-back set against the Chicago Bulls on the 20th, and then you're in Cleveland to play the Cavs on the 21st. And then the Knicks begin their second West Coast trip in March. They have a back-to-back at Staples Center, or whatever they call it now, against the Lakers and Clippers. That's on March 6th and March 7th. Then they go play the Kings on the 10th, the Blazers on the 12th, and then they're in Golden State on the 15th. So that's your second West Coast trip. Those games are all part of 11 out of 14 on the road. But then you have a home-heavy schedule from March 22nd to April 1st, where 5 of your 6 games are at Madison Square Garden. And then you wrap up the season. You're in Cleveland on the 2nd of April. You have a back-to-back set on the 4th and 5th, on the 5th and 6th in Atlanta, and then at home versus Charlotte. Then you go home, then you stay home to play the Boston Celtics on the 8th. And then you begin a back-to-back set in Detroit on the 10th, followed by a game at the Garden against the Cavs on the 11th. And then your last game of the season after that is in Brooklyn. So that's your NBA schedule for the Knicks this year. 34 national televised games, 14 sets of back-to-backs. So they're starting to get less back-to-backs every year because it's just so soft nowadays. But overall, I'm excited. I'm very excited for the season. I'm also very skeptical. I'm not going to lie. I'm excited and I'm just as skeptical. I'm cautiously optimistic. You know, I think I'm worried about the center depth. Mitch, Precious, Jericho. How is that going to go? Are the Knicks going to have to make a move? I think most likely they're going to have to make some kind of move at big. I'm worried about health with Mitch, not only, but with Randle, with Anunoby, with Jalen. You know, the wrist, obviously, we'll see. And again, like we said, offensive play style should be interesting. Right, last year it was a lot of iHeart as a hub, a lot of short roll with iHeart, a lot of Brunson pick and roll into an isolation, a lot of DHO on the wings. How does Randle fit into this at big? There's a lot of things you can do. There's a lot of options. Will Tibbs tap into all of it? Who knows? But I'm excited for the season. I think the Knicks will win some games. Maybe we'll do more of a larger, more detailed Knicks preview in the next episode we release whenever that comes out. I can't promise you it's going to be very soon, but I'm sure it'll be before opening night. And yeah, let's go Knicks, man. I'm excited for the year. I'm excited. So appreciate you all tuning in. With that said, let's wrap it up with our trivia, and that will be that. Let's get to it right now. Okay, our NYY NYK MMA trivia question of the day for this episode. Do you think the Knicks did enough to come out of the East this year? All right, so we got an open-ended question for you. Do you think the Knicks did enough to come out of the East this year? So let me know what you think. All right, folks, that's it. That is all we have for this episode. Episode 710 is in the books. I will see you in 711 when we're back to talking New York Yankees. But this episode's in the books. Covered the Knicks. It's been a while. That felt good. I'm excited for the year. Skeptical, but excited. And we'll see what happens. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next show. This episode was brought to you by Anchor.
Hey there! If you stayed the entire way through, we thank you immensely for it. We hope you enjoyed this podcast and that you come back for the next episode real soon. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, download these episodes, and share them with your friends as well. BD4 is a 5-star podcast simply because of you. And we'd like to keep it that way. Have a wonderful day. Go Yankees and go Knicks!